I'm a Brexit fundamentalist insofar as I believe that the only good Brexit's a dead Brexit. And, it's true to say that nearly all the Brexit protagonists, Jacob Rees-Mogg, Liam Fox, all of those people, Boris Johnson, they've all been removed from formal power. Some of them are still wandering around in corridors. Some of them are on reality TV like Jacob Rees-Mogg, promising us to sell us cheap training shoes, not cheap training stews, and hormone-infested beef. But, substantially, the Brexit culture carriers are no more. There's really just Nigel standing now. So when people say, oh, we can't because, there's all these people still left, they're not in power, actually. We did a tremendously good job, all of us, in removing them from power. Unfortunately, we've still got Brexit. And it is dead, but it's still in our living room instead of it being put into a grave. And my talk really is to explain why I think that's a very good idea. In this book, Reboot Britain, I talk about the impact of Brexit thus far across all of what the so-called steeple factors, that's social, economic, environmental, technological, political, legal, etc., ethical. So it isn't just an evaluation of the economics, which is what a lot of people think about. And I'm going to just whiz you through some of the main thoughts that we can have about those things and give you a preview of what's in the book. Economically, we're losing £100 billion every year due to Brexit and 40 billion in lost taxes. I think there's another estimate recently that said it was more than 100 billion and another one that said it was 93. Well, who's counting? We all are, actually. We're all counting the cost in supermarkets. But the point of the matter is whether it's 93, 246 or 100 billion, it's far more than the 1.2 billion winter heating fiasco. It's far more than it would cost to fix social care and the recent car crash over PIP. We've suffered an enormous hike to the cost of living across the UK and in Ireland due to Brexit. By the end of this parliament, it's predicted that people will not feel better off, or they'll feel better off to the tune of -1%. And I heard Keir Starmer last night on Channel 4 News saying that we've had 14 years, the world of Tory austerity and what have you. And, no one has felt better off since 2008. Well, they're not going to feel better off by 2029. So it's -1%. Rachel Reeves simply cannot talk about growth without talking about ending Brexit. I'm hopeful she's going to do something on Wednesday, but I'm not very hopeful because they've already leaked most of it. So I don't think we're going to get a revelation on Wednesday. If we have, then I've got a hat somewhere in the house to eat. So that's the economics. In terms of the social impact, the sociology, Farage only mentioned Brexit twice since he's been forced to do it more recently. He only mentioned it last year twice as an MP. Quite surprising when you consider how much he mentioned it before. But instead, Nigel wants you to think about the boat people, the rapists, the gypsies, tramps, and thieves, to quote Cher. The truth of the matter is 90% of people coming here are perfectly legal and should be working. So all this palaver that Shabana Mahmood has gone on about removing illegal people, we are talking about small numbers of the whole. So of the 10% or so that arrive undocumented, a few of those will be criminals. Of course, they should be put in jail or sent back to their countries. This was much easier to do when we were a member of the EU, of course. Instead, we pay France to police their beaches. And living in this part of the country in Kent, I'm sure you realise just how many people you'd need to put on a beach to have any chance whatsoever of stopping people getting into boats. It is futile. I'd like, there to be a solution around deterrence, but unfortunately, you'd need to police every 50 yards of the beach to do that. And I can't remember how long the beach is in France to Britain, but it's a long time. And we're not paying enough for them to do that, nor should we, of course. So people are rightly cross at the cost of housing immigrants in hotels when they could be working in our fields, in hotels, in social care, the NHS and other places. But this is really a product of our failed Home Office scheme that allowed a massive backlog to build up to fuel that hatred of foreigners via the gutter press, in other words, the Mail, the Express and so on. So lots more we could say on social stuff, but there's a taste of that. Environmentally, Brexit is a tragedy in slow motion. I'm not going to claim that Brexit causes climate change. No, I'm not. But it does amplify the impacts of climate change because of the need to send stuff around the world, and it increases our carbon footprint basically. And the farmers know this very well because we signed deals with New Zealand for lamb, and we are currently. I'm sorry, Keir Starmer. I said this to the Labour guy. I thought we were going to have a turning point with Big Daddy Trump. We were going to say no, nay, no, nay, never, Mr. Trump. We're not having your rotten meat and your rotten products. But in fact, we are succouring him to some degree. And we didn't need to be so sycophantic to Trump, I think. Other leaders have got it right. This means we'll have to eat Trump's poor quality meat. That's not a metaphor. And ultra processed foods, which are, mainly coming from that part of the world. Um, And Brexit, therefore, is a root cause behind many of the things that people voted for in last year's general election. My MP in the local area, I went up, stood a candidate against her, and she tried to say, as a Labour MP, that nobody had mentioned Brexit on the doorstep. And I countered that, and she didn't come back at me. I said, no, they haven't. But they do mention all the offspring of Brexit. That's the cost of living, food prices, NHS, and so on. So they all have at least one foot in the Brexit sort of condition as a major root cause. Some others were exacerbated by COVID and Putin's war in Europe. That's true. But when Keir Starmer says, I'm here to fix the fundamentals, this does mean confronting the Brexit elephant in the room. And in a small way, I'm grateful to him last night on Channel 4 News because he did manage to get Brexit in the sentence, but he quickly got moved on to the Tories and austerity. And Brexit is for life. It's not just a sort of a thing that we do for a few years. So therefore, we've got to kill it. Starmer also said that he will not break the Brexit red lines, but he has already. The Gibraltar reset means that Gibraltar becomes a de facto member of Schengen, the EU single market. The Northern Ireland reset means that Northern Ireland is in the EU single market, and that people enjoy freedom of movement within the Republic and therefore the EU. And this other piece of brilliant civil service jargon, the Product Regulation Metrology Bill, that doesn't trip off the tongue very easily, does it? The Product Regulation Metrology Bill. It breaks the promise of our Brexit independence of laws. With this bill, we're effectively accepting dynamic alignment with EU standards. And I'll return to this later on because people say, oh, we can't rejoin because we've diverged too much. Actually, we haven't. So Boris said we'd take back control of our borders, laws, and money with instant gratification and no downsides. In fact, we're poorer. We've altered just two laws out of 1,600, and we have more immigration because of Brexit. So these are not Brexit betrayals, as the Brexiteers would have us believe. They're simply a pragmatic acceptance of the fact that Brexit cannot work in any form whatsoever. So that's the downside. That's what we had, and most of us know all this. So I'm just saying stuff you already know. But what's the upside? If we rejoin the EU, we can then look at growth by recovering some of that 100 billion yearly losses. People say, oh, the ship has sailed. Companies have adapted. Yes, they have adapted. Some have gone out of business. Others have moved to Europe to carry on doing business or just changing what they do. And one near neighbour I have is a chap called Paolo Arrigo, who runs a seed business up in North London. He reckons he can last one more year, and if he doesn't get the phytosanitary agreement, then he's going to go out of business. So some people are just treading water. So that is not adapting, that's coping. So if we rejoin the EU, can look at recovering some of those losses. We can deal with the massive deficits in employment in certain critical sectors, such as farming, care, the NHS, and so on. We could also deal with the question of immigration properly on a European-wide basis, rather than having to be at the mercy of the EU as a third country. In conclusion, I'll start as I began. The only good Brexit is a dead Brexit. Starmer's death by 1,000 ameliorations is still death, whichever way you look at it. In real life, I'd rather have a rapid death than a slow, painful one. Britain is better than this, having left the EU only to find we're at the mercy of the orange psychopath, formerly known as Donald J. Trump. I believe that we must apply it to rejoin the EU as a priority to fix the ills that have now become apparent. Most people didn't know what they were voting for in 2016. Now that we do, we can change only if we have the courage to do so. Courage is coming rather slowly, but it is coming. So, to summarise, here are the opportunities. I've mentioned them, so I don't need to go through them. Get your money back, get your freedom of movement sorted out, guard against Trump, tech cartels, be able to make better decisions globally, and remove all the annoying barriers to collaboration, which are coming over the hill quite soon, such as passport control and things like that. Lots of stuff. And of course, the big one in terms of Ukraine, it costs us 37 pence a day to be in the EU. And we had nearly 70 years of relative peace for that. That's not a bad deal, actually. The economics there, we can't have growth without dealing with a 4.5% resilience drag. It's now reckoned to be 6, growing on 8 into the future. So it's a huge amount. 3% was enough to crash the economy in 2008 globally. This is 4.5%, which is just dragging on us. It's more than the 22 billion or whichever figure we've got today from Rachel Reeves. And it has resulted in a significant money transfer. We can't fix it with tax rises. Denial is not a river in Europe, Egypt even. And of course, the social impacts are just as important as the money. Hate crimes have probably got another spike this year, I would imagine. There was one in 2016. There was one about 2019 when the Brexit was settled. These are identifiable rises in crime. So people say flag shagging is a neutral thing. It's not. I have specific experience of people, threatening women and children around here if they're foreign. And David Cameron made that critical error. He thought that he would lose the election, so he didn't have to do the referendum, and he completely misunderstood Farage's weaponisation of migration. And the Farage riots cost 32 million in 2024. I think they will have cost a lot more this year because they had more of them. The number of police surrounding the hotels is absolutely outrageous. Important that they did it, but an outrageous cost. And farming and Brexit, there we are, a farming protest. Don't know why that's in there. But to quote Lou Reed, in life you reap what you sow, or maybe someone else I should be quoting there. We could do what we want with it. We could improve the NHS. We can't fix the NHS. It's a long-term project, but we can't fix it.